Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Snow came early to the mountain village, soft as a secret. It gathered on cedar roofs and bowed the bamboo until each stalk hummed in the wind like a string plucked by invisible fingers. Along the frozen stream, the world held its breath, and even the foxes stepped lightly, as if not to disturb the hush the sky had laid upon the earth. On the edge of the village lived a quiet man named Wren. He was known for mending broken things: rice sieves, teacups, fishing nets, the hinges of old gates. People brought him their small sorrows, and he returned them whole. But the one thing he could not mend was the house's deeper silence, the echo that came each evening when the kettle sighed and no voice answered back. His parents had passed when the last peach blossoms fell. Since then, Wren had learned to speak with the wind, and to count the seasons by the way the bamboo bowed. On the first night of the early snow, Wren stepped outside to fetch water. The sky, washed with pale stars, looked like silk rubbed thin by years of touch. As he bent over the well, something white fell through the air and landed on his sleeve without a sound. It was not snow. It did not melt. It was a single feather, long and luminous, white so pure it held every color inside it. He cupped the feather in both hands. Warmth, faint as a sleeping breath, moved along the quill. Wren looked up. Far above, a shape crossed the moon. A great crane, wings wide as winter, circling once before gliding toward the lake beyond the pines. Wren set down the bucket and followed the soundless path of feathers in the air. Not many, only that first one, but it was enough. The snow accepted his steps as if it had been waiting. Between cedars the wind slowed, and the world's hush gathered until even the distant temple bell forgot to ring. He found the lake held beneath a skin of ice, the reeds motionless, the water black and dreaming. And there, at the shore, a figure stood in the snow. She wore a kimono white as frost, patterned with threads that caught moonlight like new snow catches dawn. Her hair was dark as pine bark after rain. But what Wren noticed first were her hands. Slender, trembling, held close to her chest as if the cold were a secret she must keep warm. One of her sleeves was torn. From the tear, Wren saw the edge of something pale, curved, and delicate. A pinion, a wing's memory. He bowed, not trusting his voice. The woman turned. Her eyes held the stillness of winter water, but within that stillness a warmth moved, the same warmth he had felt travel the feather's quill. "I am lost," she said, and though her words were simple, they carried the weight of distances unseen. The wind changed, and the ice woke before the lake. I fell. Wren glanced at the sky, where the great white shape was no longer visible. He looked back and saw the way her bare feet touched the snow without sinking. He understood without needing to be told. "Please," she said, "may I rest where the smoke rises from your roof?" Wren nodded. "My house is small," he said, finding his voice like a path through frost. "But what warmth there is will be yours." He offered his shoulder. She did not quite lean, she was too light, but the air around her softened. They walked the path back through the pines. Snow erased their footprints almost at once, as if to keep their meeting from the world until the world could learn to be gentle. At Wren's house he stoked the fire. Steam rose from the cast-iron kettle, carrying the scent of roasted rice and the last of the plum leaves. The woman sat close enough to warm her hands, far enough that the firelight could study her without frightening her shine. "Do you have a name?" Wren asked. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening for an answer in the chimney's hum. "I have been called many things by the wind," she said at last, and her mouth shaped the syllables carefully, as if each were a snowflake she did not wish to break. "But here I will answer to Yuki." "Yuki," Wren repeated. The name meant snow, but the sound of it in his mouth felt like a promise that would not melt. "I am Wren." They drank tea in a quiet that did not weigh. Outside, the snow fell heavier, rounding the corners of the world. Wren laid another log on the fire and stitched her torn sleeve with thread as fine as hair. He did not speak while he worked. He did not ask questions whose answers might be shy. When he finished, he folded the mended cloth over her wrist. His fingers brushed her skin. It was not cold. It was the temperature of dawn. "Thank you," she said. "You repair things as if you are returning them to their first breath." He smiled. "Every broken thing still remembers its shape." She looked at the feather on the tatami, where he had placed it as one might place a small altar. The lamplight found colors inside the white, faint rose, the blue of shadows at noon, the yellow of wheat in distant summers. "You followed this," she said. "I followed what it asked," Wren said. "Sometimes the world leaves a thread." The fireside. Wind moved along the eaves like a careful hand. Yuki watched the flames until her eyes softened. "I will leave at dawn," she said. "I do not belong to roofs." Wren nodded. He did not clutch. He did not beg the snow to stay. "Then sleep here until the horizon lifts," he said. "Dream where it is warm." Yuki lay down near the hearth, her hair spread like ink across a page. Wren placed an extra quilt over her and sat by the door with his back to the wood, as he had done on every storm night since childhood. He listened to the stove tick, to the wind play the bamboo, to the small sound Yuki's breath made when it met the air and forgave it. Halfway between waking and sleep, he saw it, the faint suggestion of wings in the shadow her body made against the wall. Not an illusion, not a trick, just the truth the fire learned to whisper when the world was finally quiet enough to listen. He woke before dawn. The house was dim, the fire a low red eye. Yuki was still sleeping, her hands folded like birds at rest. Wren stepped outside to split wood. The axe entered the grain as if the log had decided its own undoing. The mountain was a silhouette of patience. He looked east. The horizon had not yet lifted. Inside, steam rose from the kettle again. Wren poured tea and set a bowl near Yuki's pillow. Her lashes flickered. "Is it morning?" "Almost," he said. "The kind of almost that makes the day careful." She sat up, the quilt sliding like snow from a branch. "I must go," she said. "There is a place in the sky that is shaped like my name, and it will be empty if I do not return. Ren bowed. May the wind be your road, he said, though the words braided with a thread of ache he could not tuck away. Yuki stood. For a heartbeat the room brightened, as if dawn had chosen the house before choosing the world. She stepped toward the door, then paused. There is a rule, she said, eyes on the feather. If I return, you must not ask me from where. If I stay, you must not ask me what I am. Run looked at her, then at the mended sleeve, then at the small steam ghost rising from the tea he had poured for two. I have lived long enough with winter to know that questions can break delicate weather, he said. If you return, I will open the door. If you stay, I will light the fire. Something in Yuki's face changed. Not brighter, not darker, only nearer. Then I will come back when the snow remembers to fall again, she said. If I do not, keep the feather and mend what the world forgets. She stepped into the pale, unchosen morning. The snow was falling softly, each flake practicing its landing. Ren stood in the doorway and watched her cross the yard as if crossing a page. At the gate, she turned once and bowed. The horizon lifted, not yet gold, not yet blue, and the white shape of a crane rose from where she had been. A single wing beat bending the snow with gentleness too precise for words. Ren bowed to the bird, then to the empty place where the woman had stood. He closed the door and held the feather in both hands until its quiet warmth found the space in him where silence had made a room. Days passed. The snow deepened, then thinned. People came with their cracked bowls and split baskets, and Ren mended each as if it were the last broken thing he would ever touch. At night he placed the feather on the windowsill where moonlight could speak to it. Sometimes he thought he heard the bamboo laugh softly. Sometimes he dreamed he was a field of reeds and the wind was walking through him on its way to somewhere kind. Winter softened its grip. The first plum bud swelled on the oldest branch behind the house. News traveled along the road that cranes had been seen at the marsh edges, tall as old stories, eyes dark as inkstone pools. Ren mended a fisherman's net and tried not to listen with his whole body to the sky. On the evening before the equinox, the snow remembered how to fall one last time. The flakes were large and slow, like paper lanterns that refused to burn out. Ren swept the step 3 times, the broom making a music that sounded like patience combing its hair. A knock came at the door, not loud, not hurried, a sound like a poem remembering its next line. Ren slid the door open. Yuki stood there in the snow, a small smile folded in the corner of her mouth, as if she had brought back a word she had borrowed from the moon. She carried nothing. The cold did not bite her. In her eyes, the lake's winter had learned to glow. "May I come in?" she asked, "and warm the place where the steam forgets its own name?" Ren stepped aside. "The fire has been practicing gentle all day," he said. "It will be glad to meet you again." She entered. Snow loosened its hold on her hair without wetting it. Ren placed the feather back upon the tatami, and the room felt complete in a way that did not feel like closing. They drank tea. They let the kettle speak for them. When the steam cleared, the space it left was soft, like the inside of a shell. Yuki looked at the mended sleeve, then at Ren's hands. "There are threads," she said, "that are not silk and not cotton. Threads woven out of the way a person listens." Ren nodded. "They are the strongest," he said. She tilted her face toward the eaves where the wind had begun to hum a scale the night often practiced when it wanted to be kind. "If I were to stay," she said very quietly, "you would have to promise never to pull at the seam of my name." Ren's throat ached the way a lake aches before ice becomes water. "I would promise to hold what I am given without asking it to be more." The fire gave a small, approving sound, the crack of a not remembering leaf. Yuki smiled, and in that smile the room learned a new shape. "Then we will try," she said. "You will mend what can be mended. I will keep winter from forgetting how to be beautiful." Outside, the snow fell with the care of someone writing a letter to a friend they have loved all their life. Inside, a crane's feather rested upon tatami, holding the light like a vow made of breath. And somewhere above the pines, unseen, the moon closed her eyes and blessed a house where two silences had decided to listen to one another. Morning unfolded like a shy thought. Thin threads of sunlight slid through the shoji paper walls, painting slow-moving clouds across the tatami. The fire in the hearth had died to embers, but warmth still clung to the air. Not the warmth of flame, but of presence. Yuki moved silently, her kimono brushing against the floor with a sound like feathers remembering flight. Ren watched from the threshold, unsure if she was awake or dreaming. The way she moved made the air itself seem alive. When she reached for the kettle, the steam rose not straight but curved, as though greeting her. He realized, for the first time in his life, that a house could breathe. Yuki turned toward him and smiled, the smallest curve of light touching her lips. "Your house is kind," she said. "It listens. It listens because it has been lonely," Ren replied softly. "Like me." She looked around, the shelves lined with mended bowls, the paper lantern patched with rice glue, the broom standing upright as if it remembered its purpose. "Loneliness," she said, "is a room waiting to be filled with gentleness." Ren thought about that for a while. Then he poured her tea. The days began to take shape like snow gathering on branches. Slow, deliberate, and full of quiet. Yuki helped in small ways. Folding the futons, sweeping the porch, stirring rice with the patience of wind through reeds. When she touched objects, they seemed to hum softly. A cracked teacup mended by Ren months ago suddenly glowed faintly in the lamplight, its golden seam catching warmth. Even the fire burned steadier when she sat near it. One evening, as twilight gathered, Ren asked, "Do you miss the sky?" Yuki paused, holding her cup between both hands. "I dream of it," she said, "but dreams are not the same as longing. Longing burns. Dreams sing quietly, waiting for the right echo." Ren nodded. "Then may this house be your echo." She looked at him for a long moment, not with surprise, but with the stillness of someone who recognizes an answer to an unspoken prayer. "Then it already is." The villagers began to notice that Ren's house had changed. Smoke rose from its chimney in elegant spirals, never torn by wind. The flowers by his gate, winter camellias, bloomed long after they should have slept. Children said they heard laughter from within, though when they pressed their ears to the walls, it was only the sound of two kettles whispering to each other. One day, an old woman brought Ren a broken mirror. "Can you mend what has forgotten how to see?" she asked. Ren smiled. "Perhaps it only needs to be reminded." He placed the mirror before Yuki. "Would you help me?" Yuki touched its surface. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the mirror's silver rippled like water. The crack sealed. In its reflection, Ren saw not himself but both of them. Standing close, the light from the fire joining them like a single thread of gold. The old woman gasped. "You have married your souls," she whispered, half afraid. "Be careful, Ren. The world watches when two hearts begin to glow." Yuki bowed her head. "We will live quietly," she said. "Even the moon must hide behind clouds sometimes." That night, Yuki stood outside, looking up at the stars. Her breath curled into the air like silk threads. Ren joined her, wrapping his shawl around them both. "You seem far away," he said. "I am listening," she whispered. "The cranes call from beyond the ridge. Their wings remember me." Ren's heart tightened. "Will you go to them?" "Not yet," she said. "The snow has not finished falling." She placed her hand over his chest. "Your heart beats like the winter lake, still, but alive beneath the ice. Promise me you will not try to see what sleeps below it." He covered her hand with his own. "I promise to wait for spring without asking how it comes." Days passed like a melody too soft to end. Sometimes Yuki disappeared for hours, returning with frost on her sleeves and silence in her eyes. Sometimes Ren woke in the night and found her sitting beside the feather, tracing invisible patterns in the air. When he asked if she was cold, she smiled faintly and said, "The cold only hurts when it is forgotten." Ren never pressed further. He mended, cooked, listened. The house seemed to grow gentler, its beams creaking in rhythm with their breath. Even the shadows looked content. One morning, he found her by the window, gazing at the horizon where clouds gathered like folded cranes. "It will snow again soon," she said. "When it does, you must not follow me." Ren's voice faltered. "Will you leave?" Her smile was as soft as the falling light. "The sky always calls its feathers home, but perhaps this time I will return sooner." She turned to him, and in her eyes he saw something infinite and tender. A love too vast to be kept by one body alone. "If I go," she whispered, "remember this. Love is not the keeping but the returning." Ren wanted to speak, to tell her that she had already become part of the world he breathed, that the space beside the fire would never feel whole without her shape. But before words could form, a snowflake landed on the window. It melted, leaving a trail of light instead of water. Yuki looked at it and smiled sadly. "It begins." That night, the snow returned, soft, relentless, endless. The wind howled like something searching for its name. Ren sat by the fire, listening to the roof creak, the walls sigh. Yuki stood by the door, dressed once again in her white kimono. The feather glowed faintly between them. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Every winter," she said, "when the snow remembers its promise." She opened the door. The storm did not touch her. It parted like a curtain around her steps. Run watched her walk into the whiteness until the air swallowed her completely. Then he closed the door, placed the feather upon the hearth, and whispered, "Then I will wait." The fire flickered. The house exhaled. And in that exhale, something living, something between warmth and longing, began to pulse within its walls. The house had learned to breathe. Winter deepened, and Wren's house became a world made of silence and memory. The snow fell without hurry, layering the village in white upon white, until the paths disappeared and every shape softened into stillness. The smoke from Wren's chimney rose straight into the sky, a single thread connecting him to whatever heaven had borrowed Yuki away. Each morning he opened the door and bowed to the snow. He said nothing, but the wind always answered, a sound between sigh and song. He learned to hear her voice in that sound. Soft, distant, never lost. The world, he realized, had become her echo. Inside, the house breathed as it had before, though slower now, as if mourning gently. The feather on the windowsill glowed faintly each night, as though remembering warmth from a sun that lived elsewhere. Wren spoke to it sometimes. "She said she would return," he murmured, "and so I will not move it. A promise deserves a place to rest." He kept the house warm. He mended what the frost cracked. When the roof groaned beneath snow's weight, he whispered to it, "Hold a little longer. She will need a roof when the sky remembers her name." The villagers, watching from their shuttered homes, whispered too. "The hermit speaks to ghosts," some said. Others brought him rice and miso and left quickly, bowing low, afraid to meet the strange calm in his eyes. Only the old woman who had once brought the broken mirror dared linger. "She has changed you," she said one day, watching him sweep snow from the step. "Your sorrow no longer bleeds. It shines." Wren smiled. "Grief is just love that has forgotten where to go. I give it a broom, and it learns to work." The old woman nodded slowly. "Then may the snow never melt completely, for her sake and yours." At night the dreams began. Sometimes Wren dreamt of the lake, frozen and endless, with a single crane walking across its mirror. Sometimes he dreamt of Yuki's hands, stitching threads of light through darkness. Once, he dreamt that his house had grown wings and rose slowly into the storm, carrying him to a place where every heartbeat sounded like her name. When he woke, the air still held the scent of frost and feathers. One morning, while collecting firewood, he heard a sound faint as memory, a crane's cry far above the clouds. He looked up, but the sky was an unbroken white. "Too soon," he whispered. "Not yet." The wind stirred the snow, drawing shapes that looked almost like footprints leading away. He followed them to the lake. It lay beneath a crust of ice, smooth as polished glass. In the center, something shimmered, a single white feather frozen beneath the surface. Wren knelt, "So the lake has remembered you too," he said. "Then I am not the only one waiting." He built a small altar of stones at the shore, placed a candle upon it, and lit it. The flame bent in the wind, but did not go out. "When the ice breaks," he told the lake, "you will be free again." The weeks passed like dreams that refused to end. Snow fell, melted, froze again. Wren's hands grew rough from work, but his spirit stayed clear. Every act became prayer, sweeping, cooking, mending. The house answered him with soft creaks, its beams expanding and contracting in rhythm with his breath. The hearth's flame pulsed like a second heart. One night, he sat by the fire and spoke aloud, not to call her, but to remember her. "Yuki," he said softly, "if you can hear me, know that your warmth is still here." The house listens. The snow sings your name in every drift. Even when you are sky, you are also earth. The feather glowed brighter than it ever had before. Outside, the wind rose, not in anger, but like a song that had waited too long to be sung. Ren closed his eyes. He heard wings, not outside, within. The sound filled the room, soft and vast, like snow falling through dream. The fire leaned toward it, bowing in reverence. The tatami trembled slightly, but the house did not fear. It only exhaled, and in that exhale, Ren felt her presence brush against him. Cool, gentle, infinite. "You kept your promise," the wind whispered. He smiled without opening his eyes. "You did too." When morning came, the world was washed clean. The sky burned pale blue above the mountains, and the snow shone as if made of light itself. The lake had cracked open along its center, releasing small rivulets of silver water that shimmered under the sun. Run walked there, carrying the feather. He knelt beside the altar, which had half sunk into the thawing ground. He placed the feather upon it and bowed deeply. The wind circled him once. For a moment he thought he saw her, a figure in white, walking across the ice, leaving no footprints. When he blinked, she was gone, but the air held warmth that the season could not explain. He whispered, "Then you are everywhere." The lake answered with a sound like laughter softened by distance. Spring arrived slowly, careful not to startle the snow that still clung to the hills. Plum blossoms opened, hesitant and tender. Children ran barefoot through puddles. And Ren's house, though small and simple, remained a place of quiet radiance. Travelers sometimes stopped and said, "There is peace here," as if someone invisible is blessing the walls. Ren only smiled. Perhaps the house remembers someone kind. Each evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he placed a small cup of tea near the windowsill where the feather had once rested. He did not need to see it to know it was there. Some promises do not need proof. Some songs are sung only by silence. And when the first cranes returned to the marshes, flying low and slow across the golden sky, Ren looked up and bowed. High above, one bird broke formation, circled once and cried. A note clear and full of memory. The sound lingered long after it vanished from sight, winding through the air, through the trees, through the house that still breathed. Ren closed his eyes and listened. He did not weep. He smiled, for he knew that love, once truly given, does not end. It changes shape, like snow becoming river, like wind becoming song. And deep within that song, her voice whispered, "I am home." The years passed softly, like snow dissolving into spring. Seasons folded and unfolded, each one a letter from the sky written in light, rain, and silence. Ren's hair silvered, not from sorrow but from patience. His house remained small, warm, and alive. Travelers still paused by his gate and felt peace ripple through them like wind across water. He had not seen Yuki since the winter she vanished into the snow, yet he never called it loss. He called it waiting, a waiting that did not wound, but breathed. Her presence lingered everywhere. In the creak of wood at dusk, in the hush before rain, in the crane's cry that sometimes threaded through twilight like a memory with wings. One morning, as he swept the porch, a familiar thing drifted down from the sky, white, slow, deliberate. It turned in the air once, twice, before landing on the ground before his feet. A feather, long, luminous, uniged. Ren knelt, hands trembling. The feather pulsed faintly with warmth, as if it had traveled through years only to return home to rest. "So," he whispered, "you found the way back." He lifted it gently. The moment he touched it, the world seemed to exhale. The trees stilled. The wind paused. Even the snow that still clung to the mountaintops held its fall. Ren carried the feather inside and placed it where it had always belonged, on the tatami by the fire. For the first time in years, the house sighed like an old friend waking from a dream. The feather glowed, bright enough to fill every corner with light soft as breath. He sat before it and closed his eyes. "If you can hear me," he said softly, "know that this light will always have a place." That night the dream returned. He stood beside the frozen lake once more. The sky above was silver, endless, trembling with distant wings. The surface of the lake rippled, though no wind stirred it. From the far shore, a shape began to walk across the ice. Slender, graceful, radiant. "Yuki," Ren whispered. She approached, her steps leaving ripples instead of footprints. Her white kimono shimmered like moonlight woven into cloth. She stopped before him, close enough that the air between them glowed. "You waited," she said. "I only kept the fire burning," he answered. "You were the one who found the way back." She smiled. "The snow remembered. The world kept the promise we made." Ren bowed his head. "Then love was stronger than forgetting." "Love," Yuki said, "is the memory that chooses to return." She reached out her hand. He hesitated, afraid that touching her would dissolve the dream. But when her fingers brushed his, warmth bloomed. Not the warmth of flesh, but of belonging. The feather appeared between their hands, pulsing softly like a heartbeat shared between them. "It has traveled far," Yuki said, "through winter and silence, through your waiting and my wandering. It carries everything we could not speak." Run looked down at the feather, then at her. Then may it rest here between us. She nodded. It already has. The ice beneath them began to melt, not into water, but into light. The lake shimmered, and the stars above trembled as if bowing. Yuki stepped closer, her form flickering between woman and crane. Wings folding, unfolding, breathing in rhythm with the earth. "Must you go again?" Ren asked. She smiled sadly. "I belong to the wind, but I am never far. When snow falls, it is only the sky remembering love. Then I will wait for winter gladly," Ren said, "for it means you are near." She touched his face. Her hand was cool and soft, carrying the scent of rain before dawn. "Then we are no longer waiting," she said. "We are part of the same breath." The world around them brightened until everything was white. Not empty, but full. Ren felt no fear, no ache, only stillness that sang. He woke before dawn. The house was quiet, the fire's last ember glowing faintly. The feather rested where he had left it, warm against the tatami. He smiled. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Slow, patient, endless. Ren opened the door and let the wind enter. It swirled gently around him, tugging at his sleeve like an old friend. And in the whisper between gusts, he heard it, the faintest sound of wings. He stepped outside. The sky was white and alive. Across the valley, a single crane circled, then descended toward the lake. It landed gracefully, bowed once, and stood still. Ren bowed in return. The crane lifted one wing, and from its feathers, a faint light spilled, painting the snow in gold and silver hues. Then it took flight again, vanishing into the dawn. Ren returned to his hearth. The house was warm. The air hummed. The feather glowed softly, its light steady and calm, like a promise that no longer needed to be spoken. He sat down, folded his hands, and whispered, "Then you have come home." And from somewhere beyond the snow, a voice, soft as breath, eternal as love, answered, "I never left." Years became whispers in the wind. The world continued its quiet turning. Spring painting the hills with green sighs, summer draping gold across the fields, autumn spilling its quiet fire. Through it all, Ren lived softly, tending the same hearth, mending what broke, listening to what stayed. He had become part of the rhythm, the slow breathing of the mountains. Children who once feared his silence now brought him small things to fix: wooden toys, sandals, cracked bowls. To each he gave more than repair. He gave patience, and through that patience the children learned gentleness. They would later say that the man who lived alone by the lake could speak to the snow. Inside his home, the feather never dimmed. It no longer glowed bright but steady, like an old star that knew it did not need to prove its light. Sometimes, when Ren fell asleep beside it, the feather would lift slightly, as if stirred by a breath not his own. He knew then that Yuki was near. As winter approached again, Ren began to feel the pull of the wind differently. It did not call him away. It called him inward, toward rest. His hands trembled when he worked, but his heart grew lighter. He spent long hours by the fire, staring at the feather, remembering not moments, but feelings. How her voice softened the air, how her silence filled rooms with meaning. One evening, as snow began to fall outside, he lit incense and whispered, "You said love was the memory that chooses to return." One evening, as snow began to fall outside, he lit incense and whispered, "You said love was the memory that chooses to return." Then this winter, let it remember us. The house sighed, the fire bowed low, as if listening. Outside, the snow thickened, swirling in circles. It gathered at the window and pressed close, like a child peeking in. Rin smiled and whispered, "You are early, Yuki." That night, he dreamt of the mountain covered in silver feathers. The lake gleamed beneath a sky so vast it seemed to breathe. He walked across the frozen water, his steps leaving no mark. The air shimmered, and from it emerged Yuki, radiant, timeless, her eyes filled with the stillness of eternity. "You came," she said. "I only followed the snow," he replied. They stood facing each other, the silence between them deep as creation. She reached out, and for the first time he did not hesitate. Their hands met, and the world dissolved into light. In that light, he saw everything. The first feather that had fallen, the warmth of shared tea, the firelight on her face, the seasons folding and unfolding around their promise. Every moment, every breath they had shared, existed still, woven into the snow, the air, the rhythm of the lake. "Will I wake from this?" he asked softly. "You already are," she said. "You are waking into what was always real." When morning came, the villagers found Ren's house quiet, the smoke from the chimney rising perfectly straight into the pale winter sky. Inside, Ren sat by the fire, his face calm, his hands resting gently in his lap. He looked as though he had simply closed his eyes to listen. Beside him, the feather glowed faintly. Snow had entered through the open door, yet none of it had melted. It had vanished, or perhaps it had taken flight again. That night, as the villagers returned home, they saw something wondrous. A pair of white cranes circled the moon, their wings gleaming like silver fire. They called once, a sound soft as blessing, then vanished into the clouds. And when the snow fell upon the village, each flake seemed to glimmer faintly, as if remembering two names whispered by the wind. From then on, each winter, the lake would freeze in a perfect circle, its center glowing faintly under the moonlight. Travelers who passed by said they heard faint music there, the sound of feathers brushing air, the hush of breath shared between worlds. The villagers built a small shrine beside the shore. They called it the house that breathes. Those who prayed there were said to find their lost loves and dreams, not as ghosts, but as warmth, laughter, and forgiveness. And sometimes, on nights when the snow fell slow and endless, a single white feather would drift down from the sky, land on the shrine steps, and vanish before morning. The elders would smile and say, "The winter remembers." Far above, in the quiet beyond clouds, two cranes flew side by side, their wings catching moonlight, their voices echoing across eternity. They did not need words, for everything between them was already said. The snow fell below them like blessings returning home. And in the heart of that falling light, love remained, endless, nameless, whole. Long after the villagers forgot Wren's name, the story remained, whispered by wind, carried by snow, remembered by cranes that flew across centuries. The lake still froze each winter in its perfect circle, and each spring, when the ice melted, the water shone with light that did not belong to the sun. They said it was the memory of love. High above the mountains, where clouds drifted slow as thought, two cranes flew side by side. Their wings brushed the air with soundless grace, weaving a pattern only eternity could read. When they glided over the lake, the water rippled, not from wind, but from recognition. Below, the shrine still stood, its roof bowed with snow. Travelers came to pray there. Lovers, wanderers, those who had lost something they could not name. None of them knew the true story, yet all left with the same feeling, that something unseen had touched their hearts gently and reminded them how to breathe. One winter, a young girl from the village brought a broken flute to the shrine. His body was cracked, its song silenced. She placed it beside the altar and whispered, "If love can remember, may sound remember too." That night, snow fell thicker than it had in years. The wind circled the shrine, humming low, and somewhere above the clouds, a single white feather drifted down. It landed on the flute, glowing faintly, then vanished. In the morning, when the girl returned, the flute was whole again. When she played it, its tone was pure and calm, like a distant crane calling across water. From then on, each time she played, snow began to fall, slow and gentle, as if the sky itself were listening. The years gathered, the shrine aged, moss grew soft along its stones, and yet, every winter, a light still appeared within it, not from candles or moon, but from the air itself. Some said it was the spirit of Wren tending the hearth. Others said it was Yuki watching from the sky. The truth was simpler and greater. There was no separation anymore. What had been two souls had become one breath shared by heaven and earth. The snow that fell over the lake was their language. The wind that crossed the mountains was their laughter. The light that lingered on every feather was their love remembering itself. One night, under a moon pale as memory, a traveler approached the shrine. He was old, weary, carrying a lantern. When he saw the frozen lake, he set down the light and bowed deeply. "I have followed your story," he said softly. "I wanted to see where love learned to last." The wind stirred gently. A feather fell. He caught it, held it close, and for a moment felt warmth move through him. A warmth that was not of the body but of recognition. He placed the feather back on the altar and whispered, "Thank you for teaching the sky to dream." When he left, the snow began again, light, endless, forgiving. Far above, in the breathless quiet between stars, the two cranes circled once more. Yuki's wings shimmered silver, Wren's gleamed gold. Between them, Light wove a thread that stitched the horizon to the heart of the world. "Do you see?" she asked. Her voice carried on the air itself. "I see," he said. "The sky remembers. And it dreams," she whispered. They flew on, dissolving into dawn, their feathers scattered like seeds of light. Each one became a snowflake, a sound, a story, a reminder that nothing beautiful is ever truly lost, only transformed. And when night returned, the lake below reflected two shapes forever circling each other, white, bright, and eternal. The villagers called them the lovers of the sky. They said when snow falls without wind, it is because the two are dancing softly, endlessly, teaching the heavens to remember love. And so the world learned a secret too gentle to speak aloud, that love is not the fire that burns, nor the storm that breaks. It is the stillness that stays. The snow continues to fall, the cranes continue to fly, and the sky at last has learned to dream. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.